Welcome back to our news bulletin. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Indian forces in occupied Kashmir are staging a massacre similar to the Bosnian genocide. In a televised message marking 25 years of Srebrenica massacre, Khan urged the international community to protect the people of Kashmir. The Prime Minister remembered the 8,000 Muslims who were killed by the Bosnian Serb forces in the UN-designated safe haven. He expressed grief over the incident, criticizing the international community's response towards it. Khan said, in a similar manner, 800,000 Indian troops have made 80,000 Kashmiris hostage in the occupied valley. He said the world must not let anything similar happen again and protect human rights across the globe. Now, Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has surpassed 5,100, with 65 more fatalities in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry said over 2,700 positive cases were reported overnight, bringing the total to over 246,000. It said more than 4,000 people recovered from the virus in the past day, raising the tally to over 153,000. The ministry said over 88,000 cases are active in the country. It said the province of Punjab reported the most new infections with nearly 2,000 cases. Sindh province reported more than 1,700 infections, while the capital Islamabad registered 147 new cases. In Brazil, the death toll from COVID-19 has exceeded 70,000 as over 1,200 fatalities were recorded in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, in the US has once again reported its highest single-day infections as over 67,000 tested positive in the country. The total number of cases in the US has crossed 3.18 million, with over 134,000 deaths. The global number of COVID-19 deaths has neared 560,000, with over 12.4 million cases. Further details on this report.
The virus is rigorously spreading in the Americas with each passing day. Mexico's death toll has risen by 665 to over 34,000 with a total of 289,000 infections. The government says the real number of infected people is likely to be significantly higher than the reported cases. Brazil remains the second worst affected country from the pandemic in the world after the United States. In a recent poll, nearly two-thirds of the Americans have disapproved of President Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic. U.S. top infectious disease official Dr. Anthony Fauci said the virus is likely to spread through the air to some degree.
We've learned painfully now that this is a highly efficient transmitter from person to person. By respiratory droplets, still some question about aerosol, but likely some degree of aerosol. Infected surfaces, has been shown, can live for variable periods of time. Virus found in different body fluids, but the role in transmission is still unclear.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says it is unlikely that the new coronavirus will be eliminated.
In our current situation, it is very unlikely that we can eradicate or eliminate this virus. If we want to avoid, after lockdown, having major epidemics, we need to watch out for the small clusters, and we need to extinguish those clusters quickly. We all need to remain vigilant. We need to remain vigilant with our physical distancing, with our hygiene, with mask wearing in the appropriate settings.
Russia says it is considering to resume international flights after 15th July. Over in China, authorities have reported only 2 new coronavirus cases on the mainland. Meanwhile, South Korea has reported 35 more cases, with number of infections declining for the 4th consecutive day.
The UN Security Council has failed to find a consensus on prolonging cross-border aid to Syria after Russia and China vetoed another vote. Diplomats say the authorization for the transport of humanitarian aid to war on Syria has expired amid the deadlock. The draft proposed humanitarian aid to be delivered through 2 border crossings into Syria from Turkey for the next 6 months. Diplomats say the remaining 13 council members voted in favor of the resolution. The council has been split, with most members against Syrian allies Russia and China, who want to cut the number of border crossings to 1. The council has now unsuccessfully voted 4 times on the issue, while Russia and China have cast 2 vetoes this week. In another news, the Taliban say they have released another 17 Afghan security personnel as part of a prisoner swap under the Doha peace deal. In a tweet, the group spokesman Sohail Shaheen said the detainees were released in Ghor province. He said the released men were given some money as transportation fare. Kabul government has already freed more than 4,000 Taliban fighters, while the group has completed around 2/3 of their releases. The two sides are required to release 6,000 prisoners in total under the deal. Iran says it is determined to develop its oil industry despite the U.S. sanctions imposed on the country. In a televised speech, Oil Minister Bijan Zanganeh said Tehran will not surrender under any circumstances. Zanganeh said Iran will increase its production capacity so that it can enter the market and revive its share. Tehran's crude production has halved to around 2 million barrels per day after Washington reimposed sanctions. Iran's oil exports are currently estimated at 100 to 200,000 barrels per day, down from more than 2.5 million barrels that Iran shipped in April 2018. U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington's relationship with China has been severely damaged due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking to reporters on a flight to Florida, Trump said Beijing could have stopped the virus outbreak, but it did not. The president also said he is not thinking about a possible next stage of the U.S. trade deal with China. The status of the trade agreement between the two superpowers has come under question amid the COVID-19 crisis. Meanwhile, a campaign rally for Trump set for today in New Hampshire has been postponed because of a tropical storm off the East Coast. Today marks the 25th anniversary of Srebrenica massacre when Bosnian Serb forces killed over 8,000 Muslims in the UN-designated safe haven. Years later, mass graves of Bosnian men and boys are still discovered in the area, and the pain and sufferings continue. This report has more.
The Srebrenica massacre in July 1995 during the Bosnian War was Europe's worst atrocity since World War II. The Bosnian War broke out in April 1992, and by early 1993, Muslims were flocking to the town of Srebrenica, one of 6 UN-declared safe areas. On 9th July 1995, President Radovan Gracic ordered to conquer Srebrenica, and Serb soldiers took 30 Dutch peacekeepers hostage. Upon the fall of the town of Srebrenica, Serb General Ratko Mladic only let women, children and the elderly go, much to the concern of the UN.
The second major problem is the whereabouts of the men. This is a group mostly composed of women, elderly and children. We have reports, but we cannot confirm that there may be thousands of them in Bratunac. We have been asking for access. We have not been given access. We have international staff. But evidently the whereabouts, the fate, and the non-access to many men, thousands of men, is also a matter of deep concern.
About 15,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys tried to flee Srebrenica overnight, but Serb troops ambushed and killed about 8,000 of them. Serbs used bulldozers to throw the bodies in numerous mass graves, while thousands of women and girls were raped. Amid growing international pressure, The Hague indicted Karadzic and Mladic in 1995, and they were arrested about 15 years later. Both leaders were convicted for the genocide and war crimes of the 44-month Serb aggression.
Grants Judges de Prada and Rosa Descending the prosecution's 4th ground of appeal, dismisses Judges de Prada Descending the prosecution's appeal in all other respects, sets aside Judges de Prada and Rosa Descending the sentence of 40 years of imprisonment, and imposes Judge de Prada and Rosa Descending a sentence of life imprisonment.
Mladic, dubbed the Butcher of Bosnia, was convicted on 2 counts of genocide and 5 counts of crimes against humanity.
The change in the status of Istanbul's Hagia Sophia Museum has got a strong reaction from around the world. This comes after Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan decreed to convert the landmark into a mosque after a court ruling. The United Nations agency UNESCO has urged Istanbul to immediately open a dialogue to preserve the monument status as a World Heritage Site. The agency said the World Heritage Committee will hold a review of the building during its next session. Meanwhile, the US and the EU have also expressed disappointment and regret at changing the status of the landmark. Neighboring Greece said the offensive decision will harm Istanbul's relations with Athens and Brussels. Elsewhere, Cyprus and the Russian Orthodox Church deemed the move as historical appropriation. Now, Turkey says it has killed 8 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in airstrikes during Operation Claw Tiger in northern Iraq. The National Defense Ministry said military operations backed by air power were carried out in the Haftanin region. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy terrorist weapon caches and shelters. It said over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 5 months. State media said PKK militants often use northern Iraq to plan cross-border terrorist attacks in Turkey. Turkey holds the militants responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. In Serbia, thousands of people protest for a fourth consecutive night against President Alexander Vučić for mishandling COVID-19 pandemic. Police fired tear gas to push back the protesters from entering the parliament in central Belgrade. Protesters stormed the parliament, throwing bottles, rocks and flares at the police and removing metal fences. Police said several people were arrested, while many reporters were injured in the clashes. This week, protesters were initially rallied against economically stifling measures to contain the pandemic, but demonstrators soon turned anti-government, demanding Vučić's resignation. Now, Serbia's President Alexander Vučić says he is hopeful of a peace deal between his country and Kosovo. Speaking in an interview after a video conference, he said efforts by Germany and France to restart talks are paying off. Vučić said he wants to find a way to reconcile Serbs, Kosovars and Albanians still scarred by the wars of the 1990s. Regarding a possible peace deal, the president said he does not care if it happens in a month or in 2 years. In a statement, Berlin said discussions between Vučić and Kosovo's Prime Minister Abdullah Hoti will resume on Sunday via video conference. Kosovo declared independence from Serbia in 1999, which Belgrade does not recognize. We are now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. Singapore's ruling People's Action Party has retained power in the general election, but with a reduced majority. The returning officer announced PAP won 83 of the 93 parliamentary seats. The opposition Workers' Party secured 10 seats. The PAP has got just over 61% of votes compared to nearly 70% in last election in 2015. In a press conference, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said the votes percentage was not as high as he had hoped. He said the result still reflects broad-based support for the PAP. Russia says the treaty on open skies will collapse if the US persuades its allies to pull out after its withdrawal. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said the US move to withdraw from the treaty is unjustified and its motives are unacceptable. In an interview, Ryabkov said the US is trying to put the blame for this decision on Russia is unscrupulous. He said the US is following a policy of maximum freedom from any restrictions in the arms control sector. After the US decision to withdraw from open skies and the INF treaty, New START is the only binding nuclear arms agreement between the two countries. The Netherlands says it will take Russia to the European Court of Human Rights over the 2014 downing of Malaysia Airlines flight over Ukraine. Nearly 300 people on board were killed when MH17 passenger jet was shot down by a missile allegedly fired from Russia. Nearly two-thirds of the 300 victims were Dutch. In a letter to the Parliament, Foreign Minister Stef Blok said his government will give all information on MH17 to the court. After years of collecting evidence, a Dutch-led investigation team said the missile came from a Russian army base. The 4 suspects, 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian, are said to have arranged the missile system. Despite the case, the Dutch government said it wants to continue talks with Russia on MH17. In Nepal, the death toll from flash floods and landslides triggered by heavy rainfall has risen to 23. The country's meteorological department says the current spell of monsoon rains will last for another 3 days. Officials say 9 people have been killed and more than 30 are missing in Meagdi district. The Home Ministry said 7 people, including 3 children, lost their lives due to landslides in Kaski district. Another 7 were killed in Jajarkot district in the far west. Narayani and other major rivers in the country have swollen due to the continuous downpour for the last 48 hours. In Mali, a protester was killed after the demonstrations became violent, forcing the state broadcaster to go off air in the capital, Bamako. Police fired shots and used tear gas to disperse the demonstrators who were trying to break into the National Assembly. This is the 3rd rally in a month demanding President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to stand down. There is discontent over a long-time running militant conflict, an economic crisis and disputed legislative elections. Leaders of the protests have called on supporters to occupy buildings at the start of a civil disobedience campaign aimed at forcing Keïta to resign. The violence is a growing concern for Mali and its neighbors to not further destabilize the region as it faces militant insurgency. Ethiopia's Attorney General says 2 arrested suspects have confessed to killing a popular singer from the Oromo ethnic group. In a statement, Abibekh Abebi said the killing was part of a plot to topple Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government. She said the assassination was meant to be a cover to take power from the incumbent by force. The Attorney General added, the government has identified a 3rd suspect who is still at large. She said unnamed agitators are calling for more protests and road blockades in the coming days. Singer Hashala Handesa's death sparked days of protests and ethnic violence that killed 239 people. The UN has called for fairer economic systems and availability of COVID-19 vaccine to everyone everywhere. Speaking at a virtual conference, UN Chief Antonio Guterres said the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic should be based on economic and social justice. Guterres said the pandemic has disrupted global supply chains for treatments for other diseases, including AIDS. The UN chief said a future cure against the coronavirus should be a people's vaccine.
In crisis is a wake-up call. Economies and societies must be reshaped to be fairer and more inclusive. Effective treatment and the future vaccine against the coronavirus must be available to everyone, everywhere, as a global public good, a people's vaccine. Above all, we need a recovery based on economic and social justice.
The US has welcomed the World Health Organization's probe into the origins of the new coronavirus in China. This comes after an advanced team from the WHO arrived in China to launch an investigation into the origins of COVID-19. In an interview, US envoy to the UN, Andrew Broomberg, said the investigation is a necessary step to understand how the virus spread throughout the world. He said the US expects that China's authorities will offer the team of scientists full access to data, samples, and localities. The WHO said the team will lay the groundwork for a wider mission aimed at identifying how the virus jumped from animals to humans. The US has been criticizing the global health body and withdrew its funding, accusing it of not doing enough to question Beijing's actions at the start of the crisis. US President Donald Trump says he will sign an executive order on immigration in the next few weeks with the road to citizenship for migrants. In an interview, Trump said the measure will involve deferred action for childhood arrivals, commonly referred to as DACA. DACA protects hundreds of thousands of immigrants who are in the US illegally but arrived in the country as children. This comes after the US Supreme Court blocked Trump's bid to end DACA earlier last month, which was created by President Barack Obama. The court ruling has not been able to prevent Trump from trying again to end the program, as he plans to sign the order into law in the coming weeks.
At the Supreme Court ruling, they gave the president tremendous powers when they said that you could take in this case, 700,000 or so people. Right. So they gave powers. Based on the powers that they gave, I'm going to be doing an immigration bill. One of the aspects of the bill that you'll be very happy with, and that a lot of people will be, including me, and a lot of Republicans, by the way, will be DACA. We'll give them a road to citizenship.
When is this going to be
I would say over the next 4 weeks.
UAE's Emirates Airline President Tim Clark says the Middle Eastern carrier is set to cut as many as 9,000 jobs because of the coronavirus pandemic. It is the first time the world's biggest long-haul carrier has disclosed how many jobs will be slashed. In an interview, Clark said the airline has already cut 1/10 of its staff but will have to let go of a few more. He also said that Emirates was not as badly affected as other airlines, but Clark said the airline was heading for one of its best years ever before the pandemic. The global airline industry has been severely impacted by the coronavirus, with activity all but grinding to a halt. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.